The announcement came on a Tuesday, transmitted across every major communication network in the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, her expression calm but resolute. Behind her, the blue marble of Earth rotated slowly on the massive display screen, a reminder of what humanity was choosing to leave behind. Effective immediately, the United Earth government formally withdraws from all galactic political bodies, trade agreements, and military alliances. Sarah's voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. We thank the galaxy for 67 years of cooperation. But humanity has decided to pursue a different path. The silence that followed was deafening. 5,000 representatives from across the galaxy sat in stunned disbelief. The Vorthak delegate, a tall insectoid being with 4 arms, was the first to recover. His translator crackled to life with an indignant buzz. "This is absurd. You cannot simply walk away from your responsibilities. The trade routes alone will be managed by other species, as they were before humanity joined." Sarah interrupted smoothly. "We have every confidence in the galaxy's ability to adapt." The Zephyrian representative, her crystalline features shifting between colors that indicated extreme agitation, stood abruptly. "The mediation services. Who will handle the border disputes? The resource conflicts? You humans have resolved more territorial disagreements in the past decade than any other species." Sarah's aide, Marcus Rodriguez, stepped forward with a datapad. "All ongoing mediation cases will be transferred to the Tribunal Council within 30 standard days. We've prepared comprehensive files for each situation." From the upper galleries, the amphibious Aquarians made their displeasure known through a series of harmonic calls that roughly translated to catastrophic mistake. The elderly Centaurian ambassador, whose species had been among the first to welcome humanity into galactic society, slowly rose to his feet. "Ambassador Chen, surely this decision is premature? Perhaps a temporary reduction in participation while your government considers the decision is final, Ambassador Thexmore." Sarah replied with a slight bow of respect. "Humanity appreciates your counsel over the years, but we've chosen to focus our energies elsewhere." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions in a dozen languages, while their translators struggled to keep up. The gavel of the council speaker, a massive titan whose stone-like features remained impassive, rang out like thunder. "Order. We will have order." The speaker's voice boomed through the chamber. "Ambassador Chen, this withdrawal affects thousands of agreements, millions of sentient beings, and the stability of entire star systems. Surely you can reconsider?" Sarah shook her head. "The Human Colonial Administration has already begun the withdrawal process from the outer territories. All human military vessels will return to Earth's solar system within 90 days. Our diplomatic missions will close on schedule. We've left detailed transition plans for any ongoing projects. But the frontier wars..." The Kree representative's tentacles writhed in agitation. "The Xorth Syndicate has been quiet for 3 years only because of human deterrence. Without your fleets, the galaxy managed its own conflicts for millions of years before humanity arrived," Sarah said firmly. "We have faith that you'll continue to do so." The elven delegate from Alfheim, whose species had fought alongside humanity in numerous conflicts, looked genuinely pained. "The Joint Defense Protocols are hereby dissolved," Marcus announced, reading from his datapad. "All shared technology agreements will revert to their original parameters. Human-developed innovations will remain available under existing licensing agreements, but no new collaborative projects will be initiated." A wave of disbelief swept through the chamber. The Trade Federation representative, a round being whose species had profited enormously from human commercial networks, began calculating figures on a floating holographic display. The numbers made his already pale complexion turn completely white. The economic implications alone. The shipping routes through human space carry 30% of all galactic commerce. The manufacturing centers on human colonies will be gradually transitioned to local management or other species as appropriate, Sarah said. "We're not abandoning these facilities overnight. The transition period allows for orderly transfers." In the upper observation decks, Journalists from across the galaxy frantically transmitted reports to their homeworlds. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just been participants in galactic civilization, they had become integral to its functioning. The synthetic intelligence representative, a gleaming humanoid form that had been silent until now, spoke in perfectly modulated tones. Query: what has prompted this unprecedented decision? Human integration into galactic society has been successful by all measured parameters. For the first time, Sarah's composed expression showed a hint of something else, perhaps disappointment or weariness. Humanity has come to realize that our approaches and values may not align as closely with galactic civilization as we once believed. We feel it's better for all parties if we pursue our development independently. The words were diplomatic, but those who had worked closely with humans understood the subtext. The constant political maneuvering, the endless committees that rarely reached decisions, the way seemingly simple problems were debated for years, while people suffered, it had worn down the human spirit for change and action. Ambassador Thex Moore leaned heavily on his walking staff. In 67 years, your species has brought innovation to every field: medicine, engineering, art, philosophy. You've solved problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries, and now you simply walk away? Sarah's expression softened slightly as she looked at the old Centaurian. We're not disappearing, Ambassador. We're just choosing to direct our energies toward exploration, discovery, and growth rather than politics. Humanity thanks the galaxy for the lessons learned during our time here. The quantum collective, whose hive-mind consciousness rarely engaged in individual debates, sent a pulse of pure confusion that their translators couldn't properly convey. They had valued human unpredictability as a counterbalance to their own absolute logic. The exploration initiatives, the deep space missions, began the representative from the Science Council. Will continue, but as purely human endeavors, Marcus announced. Existing data sharing agreements will be honored through their completion dates. But no new joint missions will be planned. A young delegate from one of the newer member species stood up nervously. But the teaching programs. Human universities have trained thousands of our brightest minds. The exchange programs will conclude at the end of the current academic cycle. Sarah replied gently. Students already enrolled will be permitted to complete their studies. The chamber fell into a subdued murmur as the full scope of humanity's withdrawal became clear. It wasn't just political, it was comprehensive. Cultural, economic, military, scientific, educational, every connection that had bound humanity to the galactic community was being severed with surgical precision. The speaker attempted to maintain order as panic spread through the assembly. Perhaps we could arrange for a formal review committee to address any concerns that led to this decision. No committees, Sarah said firmly. No negotiations. No compromises. No gradual transitions beyond what we've already planned. Humanity's decision is final. The human colonial administration had been planning this for 2 years in absolute secrecy. While the galaxy debated and politicized every decision, humans had quietly been preparing for their departure. Colonial governors had been briefed. Fleet commanders had received sealed orders. Trade agreements had been allowed to expire naturally rather than being renewed. As Sarah gathered her materials, preparing to leave the council chamber for the last time as Earth's representative, the implications began to sink in throughout the assembly. The humans hadn't just been participants, they had been the oil that kept the galactic machine running smoothly. They were the mediators who could find compromise when others saw only conflict. They were the innovators who approached old problems with fresh perspectives. They were the military force that had brought stability to a dozen star systems. They were the economic engine that had connected distant worlds through trade, and now they were gone. The last image broadcast from the chamber showed Ambassador Sarah Chen walking away from the podium, her small human figure dwarfed by the massive alien architecture around her. Behind her, 5,000 delegates sat in stunned silence, beginning to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. Humanity had walked away from galactic politics. The universe was about to discover what that really meant. As news of the withdrawal spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, emergency sessions convened on worlds that had never agreed on anything. The implications were too vast to ignore. For the first time in decades, species that had been at each other's throats began working together, united by the common crisis of humanity's absence. But it was already too late to prevent what was coming. The carefully balanced systems that had maintained galactic peace and prosperity for over half a century were about to collapse like a house of cards. And somewhere in the outer rim, where human colonies were already beginning their long journey home, Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile as she watched the galaxy's panic unfold on the news feeds. Perhaps now they would understand what they had taken for granted. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Kepler station medical emergency changed everything. Dr. Yithmar, the station's chief medical officer, stared at the quarantine readings in disbelief. The Rigelian plague had returned, a disease that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for 15 years, not since human researchers had developed the cure. The problem was simple and terrifying. Nobody remembered how to make the cure. The original research had been conducted entirely by human scientists at the Terra Medical Institute. The formula was available, of course, locked away in the Galactic Medical Database. But the synthesis process required techniques that other species had never fully understood. Humans had always handled plague outbreaks, arriving with their medical ships and their seemingly miraculous ability to adapt treatments to new situations. "How many infected?" Yithmar asked his assistant, a young Altarian whose blue skin had gone pale with worry. 47 confirmed cases, another 100 showing early symptoms. The infection rate is accelerating beyond our containment protocols. The irony was bitter. The galaxy had celebrated human medical advances for decades, readily accepting their cures and treatments without ever learning the underlying principles. Human doctors had been happy to share their knowledge, but their teaching methods, intuitive, experimental, constantly evolving, had been too chaotic for most species to replicate. Meanwhile, across the galaxy on Proxima 7, the first trade war in 30 years erupted between the Vorthak Confederacy and the Altair Republic. The dispute centered on mining rights to an asteroid belt rich in rare crystals. Both sides had legitimate historical claims. Both sides had presented their cases to the Galactic Council 17 times over the past 6 months. Without human mediators, the Council had been unable to reach a decision. The Vorthak, creatures of rigid logic and hierarchy, insisted that the matter be decided by historical precedent and legal documentation. The Altarians, emotional and intuitive, argued for a solution based on current need and fair distribution. The two approaches were fundamentally incompatible. Previous mediation attempts had involved committee after committee of various species, but none possessed what humans had called creative problem-solving. Where humans might have suggested splitting the asteroid belt by mineral type, or proposed a rotating mining schedule, or found some entirely novel solution nobody had considered, the other species could only repeat the same arguments with increasing frustration. The situation escalated when Vorthak mining ships began setting up extraction equipment, while the legal dispute continued. Altarian patrol vessels moved to intercept them. Warning shots were fired. For the first time in 3 decades, military vessels from major galactic powers faced each other in hostile formation. The emergency session of the Galactic Council devolved into chaos within hours. The Tribunal Council, overwhelmed by cases that had piled up since human mediators left, couldn't even schedule a hearing for another 8 months. The Defense Committee couldn't authorize peacekeeping forces without a formal mediation request. The Trade Federation couldn't impose sanctions without Defense Committee approval. The system that had worked smoothly for decades ground to a halt. On Centauri Prime, Ambassador Thex Moore stood in his private office, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. The old Centaurian had lived through the pre-human era, remembered the constant conflicts and stagnation that had characterized galactic civilization for millennia. He had hoped those days were gone forever. "Ambassador," his aide announced, "the Quantum Collective is requesting an emergency conference. Their latest analysis suggests a 47% probability of major system-wide conflicts within the next year if current trends continue." Thexmore's ancient features showed no emotion, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his communication device. The Quantum Collective's predictions were never wrong. Their hive mind could process probability matrices that would take other species years to calculate. "And the trade disruption reports?" he asked wearily. "Cargo shipments through former human space are down 62%. Alternative routes add an average of 3 weeks to delivery times and 40% to costs. The Merchant Guild is reporting the first supply shortages in some outer rim systems. The humans had been right about one thing: the galaxy had managed without them for millions of years. But that was before galactic civilization had become integrated, before worlds had become dependent on complex supply chains and instant communication. The old galaxy had been a collection of isolated civilizations that rarely interacted. The modern galaxy was an interconnected organism, and humanity had been its nervous system. In the outer rim territories, the consequences were more immediate and violent. The Xorth Syndicate, a collection of pirate clans that had been quiet for 3 years, struck without warning at a Federation supply convoy. Their ships, crude but numerous, overwhelmed the escort vessels in minutes. The attack itself wasn't unprecedented. What shocked the galaxy was what happened next. The pirates broadcast a message across all frequencies. The humans are gone. The old ways return. The strong take from the weak, as it was meant to be. Within days, similar attacks erupted across the frontier. Species that had suppressed their aggressive instincts for decades suddenly found themselves without the stabilizing presence that had kept the peace. The joint defense protocols that humans had maintained weren't just military agreements, they were psychological deterrents. Everyone knew that attacking civilian targets would bring swift human response. Now, there was no response at all. The Kree representative to the Galactic Council, Admiral Zeftar, watched the tactical displays with growing alarm. His tentacles writhed in a pattern that indicated extreme agitation. The Kree had been among humanity's closest allies, their own warlike nature tempered by human strategic thinking. "Request immediate session with the Defense Committee," he ordered his aide. "Priority Alpha." But the Defense Committee meeting, held 3 days later, lasted 14 hours and accomplished nothing. Without human representatives to cut through the diplomatic complexity, every decision required unanimous consent from 12 different species with wildly different military doctrines and political structures. The synthetic intelligence representative proposed deploying automated defense platforms. The elves argued for negotiated settlements. The Aquarians wanted to evacuate threatened systems. The Titans suggested simply ignoring the problem until it solved itself. The Vorthak insisted on formal legal proceedings before any military action. While they debated, 17 more supply convoys were attacked and looted. Dr. Sarah Kim, formerly of the Terra Medical Institute, received the emergency transmission while working in her garden outside New Geneva on Earth. She had been among the last to leave Kepler Station during the medical withdrawal, and the desperate message from Dr. Yithmar made her hands shake as she listened. "Dr. Kim, we're dying here. The plague has spread to 3 more stations and 2 planetary colonies. We've tried to synthesize the treatment, but we're missing something fundamental. Please. I know humanity has chosen isolation, but people are suffering." Sarah looked up at the sky, where the lights of returning human colony ships could be seen even in daylight as they approached Earth's orbital platforms. 12 billion humans were coming home to a system that had been designed for 4 billion. Resources were strained, but nobody complained. They had chosen this path. She could save those people. The cure was simple enough once you understood the principles behind adaptive immunotherapy and had access to human-developed nanofabrication techniques. It would take her maybe 6 hours to synthesize enough medicine for the entire outbreak. But the directive from Earth's government had been clear. No interference in galactic affairs. Humanity was pursuing its own path now. Sarah deleted the message without responding. The collapse accelerated. Trade routes that had been stable for decades suddenly became contested territory. Worlds that had cooperated for generations found themselves arguing over resources they had shared peacefully for years. The Galactic Council met in emergency session almost daily, but every proposed solution required human expertise that was no longer available. The Elven delegation attempted to fill the human role in mediation, but their ethereal approach to conflict resolution proved incompatible with most species' decision-making processes. The Centaurians offered their wisdom and experience, but their rigid traditionalism couldn't adapt to rapidly changing situations. The synthetic intelligences provided perfect logical analysis, but their solutions often ignored the emotional and cultural factors that drove most conflicts. In desperation, Some species began reaching out directly to human colonies that hadn't yet completed their journey to Earth. These contacts were politely but firmly rebuffed. Humanity's withdrawal was absolute. The first interstellar war in 35 years began over a shipping lane dispute that should have been resolved in an afternoon mediation session. The Draconian Empire and the Phoenix Federation both claimed exclusive rights to the Vega Corridor, a hyperspace route that had been cooperatively managed since before humanity joined the galactic community. In the old days, human negotiators would have proposed a simple solution: scheduled access, shared maintenance costs, joint patrol duties. It was the kind of creative problem-solving that had made interstellar commerce possible on such a massive scale. Instead, both sides dug into legal precedents dating back thousands of years. Diplomatic notes were exchanged with increasing hostility. Military exercises were conducted near the disputed space. When a Draconian freighter accidentally strayed into Phoenix space during a communication blackout, Phoenix patrol ships opened fire. The war lasted 6 days and accomplished nothing except demonstrating how quickly civilized species could revert to violence when the systems that maintained peace broke down. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, one pattern became clear to the few analysts still capable of seeing the bigger picture. Humanity hadn't just been participants in galactic civilization. They had been the component that made modern galactic civilization possible. Their departure wasn't just political, it was evolutionary. The galaxy was discovering that it had evolved beyond its ability to function without the stabilizing influence of human adaptability, creativity, and problem-solving skills. Ambassador Thex Moore, reviewing casualty reports from the Vega Corridor War, came to a realization that terrified him. The galaxy needed humanity more than humanity needed the galaxy, and the humans were already too far away to call back. The delegation that arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system 18 months after humanity's withdrawal was unlike anything the galaxy had ever assembled. Representatives from every major species floated in the vast diplomatic ship Times, Unity's Last Hope *, a hastily constructed vessel that incorporated technology from dozens of worlds, the first truly collaborative effort the galaxy had managed without human involvement. President Chen Wei, Sarah Chen's younger brother and the current leader of Earth's government, watched the approaching ship from the observation deck of Luna Station. Behind him, the lights of Earth glowed peacefully in the darkness, surrounded by the orbital platforms that housed billions of returning colonists. "They're requesting permission to enter the system," reported Admiral Martinez, the former head of the human colonial fleet. "The ship is broadcasting credentials from the Galactic Council, the Trade Federation, the Defense Committee, and, well, pretty much every organization we used to belong to." Chen Wei nodded slowly. They had been expecting this moment since the reports of galactic chaos began reaching Earth through automated monitoring stations. The question was whether anything meaningful had changed, or if this was simply another attempt to manipulate humanity into fixing problems the galaxy was unwilling to solve itself. "Grant them permission to approach Luna Station," he decided. "But maintain the quarantine protocols. No one sets foot on human territory without our explicit consent." Aboard the Times Unity's Last Hope *, Ambassador Thex Moore felt the weight of history pressing down on his ancient shoulders. At nearly 200 years old, he had seen the galaxy transform from a collection of isolated, warring civilizations into something resembling a peaceful community. He had also witnessed its rapid descent, back toward chaos, in the absence of humanity's stabilizing influence. Beside him stood representatives who would have been unthinkable as partners just 2 years ago. The Exorth Syndicate leader, former Pirate Lord Krextal, wore the formal robes of a legitimate government representative. The Vorthak and Altarian ambassadors, whose species had nearly gone to war over mining rights, sat together reviewing joint proposals. Even the Quantum Collective had agreed to participate despite their usual reluctance to engage in individual diplomatic negotiations. "Luna Station acknowledges our credentials," announced the ship's elven navigator. "We're cleared for station approach." They're willing to listen. The docking process took 3 hours, not because of technical difficulties, but because the assembled delegation spent the time reviewing their presentation one final time. They knew they would get only one chance to convince humanity to reconsider their isolation. President Chen Wei met them in Luna Station's largest conference room, a space that had once hosted planning sessions for humanity's greatest achievements. The first interstellar colonies, the development of faster-than-light communication, the establishment of the Joint Defense Protocols. Now it served as the stage for perhaps the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Honorable delegates. Chen Wei began, his voice carrying the formal tone that had once been reserved for the most serious state occasions. Earth acknowledges your request for dialogue. We will listen to what you have to say. Ambassador Thexmore stood, his walking staff trembling slightly in his aged hands. President Chen, honored human leaders, we come before you not as representatives of our separate interests, but as a united galaxy asking for forgiveness. The words hung in the air like a confession. Chen Wei's expression remained neutral, but several of the human officials behind him exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected. Forgiveness? Chen Wei asked. The elven representative, Lady Silvara, stepped forward. Her crystalline features showed deep emotion, a rarity for her species. We have spent these 18 months discovering what we lost when humanity chose to leave us. Not just your mediation services, your technology, your military protection. We lost the spirit that made our civilization worth preserving. Admiral Zeftar of the Kree military spoke next, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep respect. My species has always valued strength and honor in battle. We believed these virtues were innate to us. We have learned that our honor was maintained not by our own nature, but by the example humans set for us. Without that example, we reverted to behavior that shames our ancestors. Chen Wei listened carefully as each delegate spoke. The synthetic intelligence representative admitted that logical analysis without human intuition had led to solutions that were mathematically perfect but practically useless. The Aquarians acknowledged that their emotional approach to problem-solving required human rationality to create workable compromises. The Titans admitted that their patience, once a virtue, had become mere inaction without human urgency to drive progress. But it was Krextal, the former pirate, who delivered the most surprising statement. I spent 40 years raiding shipping lanes and terrorizing frontier worlds, he said, his scarred features serious. 3 years ago, humans convinced my clan to join galactic civilization. They offered us legitimate work, respect, a chance to use our skills for protection instead of destruction. When humans left, my people wanted to return to the old ways. I stopped them. He paused, meeting Chen Wei's eyes directly. Not because I feared human retaliation. You were gone. I stopped them because humans had taught us that we could be better than our worst instincts. Even without humans watching, we chose to remain civilized. My entire clan chose civilization over piracy, because humans had shown us it was possible. Chen Wei felt something stir within him that he had carefully suppressed for months. These weren't the same aliens who had taken humanity's contributions for granted while endlessly debating trivial matters. Something fundamental had changed. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Ambassador Thexmore activated a holographic display that showed a document written in dozens of languages, the most comprehensive reform proposal in galactic history. Complete restructuring of galactic governance, he announced. No more committees that meet for months without reaching decisions. No more bureaucratic paralysis while people suffer. We've established emergency decision-making protocols, streamlined the mediation process, and created rapid response teams for military and medical crises. Dr. Yithmar, who had traveled from Kepler Station specifically for this meeting, added, We've also established mandatory cross-species training programs. Never again will we allow ourselves to become dependent on one species' expertise without understanding the underlying principles. The Rigelian plague outbreak taught us that accepting solutions without learning them is a form of technological slavery. The Vorthak representative presented economic reforms that would prevent the kind of trade disruptions that had plagued the galaxy. The Altarian delegate outlined new cultural exchange programs designed to build genuine understanding between species rather than mere tolerance. But it was the final proposal that surprised Chen Wei the most. We want to establish the Human Advisory Council, Lady Silvara explained. Not as a governing body, but as permanent observers with the power to halt any decision they believe contradicts the principles of effective governance. Think of it as a moral compass for galactic civilization. You're asking humans to serve as galactic babysitters, Chen Wei observed, not unkindly. No, Thexmore replied firmly. We're asking humans to serve as galactic conscience. We've proven we cannot maintain civilization without the ethical framework humans provided. We're not asking you to solve our problems, we're asking you to ensure we solve them properly. Chen Wei studied the delegates carefully. Behind their alien features, he could see something that hadn't been there during the final human diplomatic missions. Humility. The galaxy had been humbled by its own failures, forced to confront the reality that their advanced civilizations had been hollow constructs propped up by human innovation and integrity. The human colonial administration has already voted on this matter, he said finally. 6 months ago, when the reports of galactic chaos first reached Earth, our colonial governors held a referendum. Every human settlement, from the smallest asteroid mining station to the largest agricultural worlds, cast their votes. The alien delegates held their breath. The vote was nearly unanimous, Chen Wei continued. Humanity will not return to galactic civilization as it was. But if galactic civilization can prove it has genuinely changed, we are willing to consider a new partnership. Hope flickered in alien eyes across the room. We propose a trial period of 5 years, Chen Wei announced. Human advisors will observe galactic governance, participate in emergency responses, and provide guidance when requested. But we will maintain our political independence. We will not rejoin the Council as voting members, and we retain the right to withdraw again if the galaxy reverts to its old patterns. And if the trial period succeeds? Asked Admiral Zeftar. Then we'll discuss a new form of partnership, not the old model where humans solved everyone's problems, but a genuine collaboration where every species contributes their strengths while maintaining their autonomy. The negotiations that followed took 3 weeks, but they were unlike any diplomatic process in galactic history. Instead of endless committees and bureaucratic delays, decisions were made quickly and efficiently using the new protocols the galaxy had developed during humanity's absence. The old ways of doing things had been abandoned out of necessity, and the new methods proved remarkably effective. Dr. Sarah Kim was among the first human advisors to return to galactic service, arriving at Kepler Station just in time to help coordinate the response to a new plague outbreak. But this time was different. Instead of simply synthesizing a cure and leaving, she worked directly with alien medical teams, teaching them the principles behind adaptive immunotherapy while they shared their own species' unique approaches to medicine. The result was not just a cure for the current plague, but a new collaborative medical research network that could respond to future outbreaks without relying on any single species' expertise. Similar partnerships emerged across the galaxy. Human military advisors worked with alien defense forces to develop new peacekeeping strategies. Human engineers collaborated with alien scientists to design more efficient hyperspace routes. Human diplomats trained alien mediators in the creative problem-solving techniques that had made human mediation so effective. Most importantly, humans shared their most valuable skill: the ability to see beyond immediate problems, to find solutions that addressed underlying causes rather than just symptoms. 2 years into the trial period, Ambassador Thexmore received a report that would have been unthinkable during the old system. The Draconian Empire and Phoenix Federation had successfully negotiated their own solution to a new territorial dispute without human mediation, without military conflict, without months of bureaucratic delays. They had simply sat down together and worked out a compromise that satisfied both sides' needs. They've learned, Thexmore murmured to himself as he read the report. They've actually learned. The galaxy had discovered something profound during humanity's absence. They were capable of greatness, but only when they held themselves to the standards humans had demonstrated. The withdrawal had forced them to grow beyond dependence into genuine partnership. When the 5-year trial period ended, the vote to formalize the new galactic partnership was unanimous among both human and alien populations. But the galaxy that humanity rejoined was fundamentally different from the one they had left. President Chen Wei, speaking at the ceremony that marked humanity's return to galactic civilization, summarized the transformation simply. We walked away not because we stopped caring about the galaxy, but because we cared too much to watch it stagnate. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to prove they can survive without you. The universe had panicked when humanity walked away from galactic politics, but in that panic, it had found something more valuable than human solutions to alien problems. It had found the strength to become worthy of human partnership, and that, more than any treaty or alliance, ensured that the galaxy would never again take for granted the remarkable species that had taught them the difference between civilization and mere coexistence.